was literally running 600 tests and 300 EQ.
And still fucking?
It's still, my dick's
You have
still.
no body fat like me, bro. We have no aromatase enzyme.
Yeah, now I know why guys take nandrolone, because like it doesn't have those estrogen crushing effects and it's like a good bulker. You know what I mean? But I thought about it and I'd be like, I'd have to run like a gram a test with 300 of this shit just to feel normal. I don't want to do that.
So what I'm going to do is this.
Dude.
I'm going to take 500 milligrams of sustanon, real sustanon. Okay. And I'm going to try to take Primo, low dose, and go up like 1 cc. Because, 1-to-1 is way too anti-estrogen.
No, it fucks you up, dude.
So I know the bloat and the size I had back in the day. I used to take 4 sustanons. My estrogen was definitely high then.
Yeah.
The more fat I accumulated, the higher estrogen, IGF-1 elevation. So now theoretically, even though I'm leaner, will I take 750? Probably not. I'll take 500 and go slow with the Primo. But it didn't do that at first for me, the Primo. It took weeks.
Once the esters peak, that's when you really start to notice it. Like I think for the first couple weeks, I felt okay. And then once I got to 300 for like a solid 4 or 5 days, I noticed that it was a problem. But I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like married. I can't not be fucking my wife. Like this is crazy. You know what I mean?
Your dick was broken. Yeah. Drive was good. Drive is good. Dick's fucking
which is torture.
Sucks.
Which is the worst thing in the world. Yeah.
So what happened with me just recently, I wanted to go up to 500 tests. I haven't done that in a long time, right? I did I tried to peak my estrogen. So what I did 200 and 300 at one time. I think my estrogen went, I don't know, but it's like not as, my drive isn't as ramp, but I did come off the Masteron.
Okay.
And what I usually do, I taper down with Proviron.
Interesting.
The DHT. I go from 40 milligrams to 20, but I think I did it too fast. I went 40 for only a few days, and I went to 20. Too much of a shelf. Drop off. You understand?
Yeah, yeah.
It didn't acclimate and adapt.
Zane, are we recording? Yeah. Okay, so.
We're too nerdy right now.
Yeah, wait, so I was going to say, you were talking, we've been doing a lot of carb cycling stuff in our own diets, dealing with our clients. And one thing that you've been like totally steadfast on since I met you was like, hey, my refeed days, I need to basically have a lot of fat with the carbs. So you're talking always about crushing pancakes with syrup.
Yeah, dude.
Whereas a lot of conventional carb cycling is that it's almost no added fat to the diet. The fat is just coming from the protein sources on that high carbohydrate day, and everything else is going to be like sugar and starch, right? And I was saying, you listen to Jay Cutler's podcast, and he's very knowledgeable, to the point of where he's holding back. I know that he does do like a coaching service, and I'm sure you get the full knowledge from him, but he absolutely holds back. But every now and again, he'll have someone on the show, and you get like an interesting gem of knowledge that comes from it. So in 2002, Jay Cutler destroys Ronnie Coleman in the prejudging for the Mr. Olympia, okay? Almost always the person who wins the prejudging wins the show. Like for a long time, the night show is for the fans. It's a formality, but sitting there in the mandatory poses with no audience, that's really who you see has the best physique, generally speaking. So as an aside, that year, Ronnie almost died. He had to drink a gallon of water before he even left his hotel room because he was in like total shutdown, passed out in his hotel room. He comes into the prejudging looking like shit. Jay comes in looking like $1 million at night. Ronnie gets the water out of his system, wins the night show by a big enough margin to offset Jay's winning the prejudging. Of course, he wins the Mr. Olympia. And Jay was mentioning that he looked flatter for the night show. I'm thinking that's interesting that, your body just ran through these nutrients so quickly. So I think Jay's best shape, I'm going to get the year wrong, was maybe like the 09 Mr. Olympia, or the famous quad stomp that you always see with the spiked up hair, like one of the best physiques of all time. At that point, he was no longer working with Chris Aceto, who was his coach from when he was 17 through his first 2 Olympia victories. He brings in Hani Rambod. Hani Rambod has trained Phil Heath, a number of guys, and really started by helping regular guys, whatever, get their pro card. And then, of course, the better you do, really realistically, the better quality client you have access to. And before you're working with great people. Point is, he mentioned that one of the things he changed for Jay's pre-show carb up was he added oil to all of the carbs because he noticed that Jay's body was tearing through the glycogen way too quickly. So to keep him full for the whole day, instead of, just having straight glucose, he was mixing in like almond oil with whatever he was having to make sure it stayed in his system longer, as opposed to having to feed up again and maybe spilling over.
That's how fast his metabolism was.
And Jay was notorious for apparently 2 problems. One, turbo fast metabolism. You know, he literally said, and this guy was hyper disciplined with his diet, that when he realized he had to put on more size to compete with Ronnie, he went out and crushed 5 guys every single night after training for a year, because he just knew, I can't possibly get this much clean food in. It's not palatable. There's just the amount of the volume of food I would have to eat to put on the size is almost undoable at that point in time. And he also had an issue with water retention, right? Like apparently he would hold water very, very easily. So apparently to get ready for the Olympia under Hani Rambod, Hani told him to eat every single meal with no condiments and no salt, to minimize any variable
potential of sodium retention.
So he's just straight eating white fish and white rice 6 times a day in huge quantities, obviously.
You gotta be driven to do that, bro.
That is the hardest thing, man. You know, and I think it's important. I mean, you and I are not bodybuilders in the conventional sense, but we're guys that love to train, different background and different things. I think like our clients, and realistically anyone, needs to almost like reframe what it means to try to look good. Like improving your physique is actually competitive eating with a little bit of exercise thrown in. It is not hard training with a little bit of eating thrown in.
Well said.
And I think that has to be your mindset, man. Like there's just, if you want to look good and if you don't have good genetics, you know, it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's literally, the sport is the eating. The hobby is the eating.
Hani Rambod. Okay, really? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? Okay, you're going to target your lower lat more. Is it the different variations of the lat pull down that makes him the expert? No, it's his application of the way he goes about the diet.
Absolutely.
That's the defining factor that makes him different.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, the training, the muscle groups, Charles Glass, it's the fucking nutrition.
The other thing that's interesting in terms of training, I think about this a lot. So like when Westside Barbell, when everyone was doing equipped lifting, it was much more popular. One of the knocks on Westside Barbell was, it's not the methods that are great, it's the environment that's great. You know, you get 20 competitive nut jobs in a room, they'll push, right? And to the point about Jay Cutler, what's one thing that he changed about his training when he was getting in shape for the 2009 Olympia? He trained with Phil Heath every day. He always trained alone before then. Now you're training with another guy who's your friend, but you're both going to be on the podium, right?
Competitive edge.
Yes. Now,
you push each other.
Even if you were following the same program, okay, you're going to push harder.
Who's going to get more reps? Who's going to go up a little?
Absolutely, dude.
It's fine.
And so, like realistically, like you could follow the same program, but your ability to eke out that one extra rep makes a huge difference, because let's say you don't have a terribly high volume program. Well, that means that the sets that you do have to count. You don't have 5 sets of 10. You might have 2 sets of 8, kind of how you and I like to train. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? You can't be doing 3 rep in reserve training. And you got to cook it. You got to fucking go. You got to push. And not everyone can do that by themselves. And on top of that, it's not necessarily advisable. Like you may be like, you could be doing shit that's dangerous. Like I've been doing a lot of Smith machine squats. I have no spotter. And I pretty much always leave a rep or 2 on the table because I just don't want to get stuck.
Yeah,
and it sucks because like in retrospect, my legs got huge when I was powerlifting because I knew I wasn't going to die. I could go for that one rep and fucking push, man. That last rep where you just feel everything about to explode.
The whole body's pushing. Yeah,
and then after that, I just grew. You knew. I just achieved enough stimulus.
That
I just
one
grew.
repetition.
Yep. Okay? And so it's really intensity in the gym, okay? Pick a program that you enjoy following, okay? And competitive eating. That's really what changing your physique is. Okay, the gym is only the priority if you are a performance athlete, right? If you're a fighter, if you have a sport that requires skill, like bodybuilding is not a skill sport. Yes, there's some skill to posing, but yeah, you and I have both trained MMA fighters in our own businesses, working with grapplers. There's a million ways to win or lose in that sport. So many ways to knock someone out, strangle someone, break their arm, break their leg, whatever the situation is. You have to practice all of those things in the gym. It's a performance sport. But if it's a physique sport, the sport is everything else. It's what you do at home. That's the real competition. The training is almost the reward as far as I'm concerned. Like the training is like, I ate really, really well. And now I know when I go to the gym, I'm going to perform really, really well. And it's like opening up a present, okay? But the reality is the investments are all what you're doing at home. And I just don't think enough people understand that. How many people have you and I trained? This is such a common thing, right? A guy who's between 35 and 50, works, maybe has kids, stuff that both you and I work and have kids, takes a little bit of TRT, goes to the gym, throws around some heavy weights, okay, might eat a lot of protein per meal, but they could be low quality, fried shit, whatever, okay, and they all look the same. It's like maybe a singular vein in their bicep, okay, muffin top, okay, no abs, but you could tell there's some muscle underneath. It's like that's what approaching training that way gets you if you don't have freak genetics. There's just no excuse. Like,
dude, every 4-year-old dad that you see at the games, even the ones who train or don't train, they all have the same bodies.
Yeah.
Huge around the midsection. Some are a little jacked. They look like they bench press.
Yeah.
It's all about the diet. And why I bring that up is, I help my friends with this. And certain ones are willing to commit to the diet and certain ones. I was speaking to a friend this weekend. I told him what we do. I'll hook you up. And it's about the diet. And he always says about, he circles back, I'm eating clean. I'm doing this. I'm doing cardio. It's not coming off. So I told him what we do. I said, listen, I'm going to hook you up, but he doesn't really want to commit to it because he knows it's hard is the food. That's the defining factor. No, let me think. What are we thinking about, bro? It's because you don't want to cut out the bacon cheddar cheeseburger. And you're happy then. That's okay.
Yeah.
But if you're unhappy, don't tell me you wonder what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, I'm not someone who says that your physique dictates what kind of person you are. Obviously, if you're morbidly obese, you don't take care of yourself, that does say something about you, and that's a bad thing, right? You don't have to be shredded to be a good person.
No.
There's no point in my life where I'm looking at someone who's 18, 20% body fat and thinking that I'm a better person than they are. It's retarded, okay? But if you want to make that change, okay, you have to make the change.
Make the change.
And I just don't think that enough people realize like how demanding it can be. But by the same token, anything that's demanding is also very rewarding, right? So like it's a very challenging endeavor, but if you can overcome that and overcome like your mental weakness, like I want to eat this bad thing, but I'm not going to do it, and get some control over your brain and over your will. Like that to me is the true reward of a physique sport. Is like I now have control over desires that maybe would have run roughshod over me before I understood how to exert my will on these things. And that's just what it comes down to. Over and over again, the more people that I work with, the more I step outside, like you say, of the very small circle of people who are very dedicated, the more I'm like, you know what, this is what everyone kind of has to work on. And I think I really struggle too, Vin, with like how to handle the person that's not committed, because maybe this is a weakness of mine and maybe you feel the same way. But like, you give someone a diet, right? And they're like, well, can I have something else? Because like, I can't do this. And part of me is like, okay, from a business perspective, should I give them something else? Maybe. But then on the other hand, I'm like, no, like you wanted to improve.
Don't give in.
And this is what you need to do to improve. And also, people will always fall short, myself included. So if I write you a diet or you write me a diet, and that diet is 100% of what we need to improve, and it won't be. A training program, my diet is always a best guess, right? Like it's the best we could do given the knowledge that we have on the person, right? You might realistically, if it was a test, get an 85 or a 90, okay? Well, 85 or 90 out of 100 is not bad considering that you're not a professional, you have things going on. It's totally acceptable for most people. If I write you a diet that's 70% of where you should be, and you get an 85 or 90 on 70% of 100, now we're really not making progress, right? So if you ask me to write you a diet, I'm not going to fucking make some shit up because you have an issue making this work. Like, I'm going to tell you what you need to do.
Yeah. It's
up to you to actually do it. And I'm not going to, nerf it, and give you something that's easy. No, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. If you do it, you're going to get results. We see this time and again with this company. The guys that follow what we say see incredible results. The guys that don't, or they ask for like the beginner or the dumbed down version of it, they struggle. And I just don't think it's worth it to like necessarily compromise on that type of stuff, because then I'm a bad coach.
The only thing I tell clients, I just had one this weekend, new client, You know, like I said, they might gas themselves up a little more than the reality, whatever, right? They like to drink. You know, they always hold back how much they like to drink. You know, I like my scotch on Saturday, but it's fine. Like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever it is, right? I said, listen, okay. Then, for instance, you got to pull back something. You don't get that high carb day. But let's be real. I'm like, you want to change? I'm like, you're going to change, but you're not going to reach your peak.
Yeah.
If you like to drink, and you know that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's form performance. You really want it that bad.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Got to really want it.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to, dude.
Yeah.
And if you want to ask me over this, like, should you cater to people like that? Like, who are like, oh, could I do something different? Be like, dude, you paid us to fucking change, and not really. I'm not going to give in, because then when you don't reach your goal, you're going to say we didn't do our job because you don't want to commit to it.
The only change that I'm really willing to make with people, and I think this is a totally normal grievance to have with a diet, and to be honest, when I went out and hired Justin Harris, he did this for me because I told him what my life was like, and he's like, okay, we're going to make some changes from the ideal diet to one you can actually follow, which is if I write you a diet and the diet says 6 meals and you work a very demanding job, you have kids, you can't make time to eat 6 meals, well, whatever, we'll take 1 meal, we'll break it up, and we'll put the macros in the other.
That's not what the problem is with
exactly.
people.
Exactly.
That's not the fucking problem. It's what they're eating.
Exactly. Yes.
That's easily doable.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, so you okay, don't eat twice, asshole.
Yeah.
But like, okay, 6 meals isn't feasible for some people.
Yeah.
We could do 4 with a shake.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can do that. You're up enough hours.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yes.
You can get a couple small meals, 3 big, whatever.
100%.
People want to actually change the content of their food. No.
No, that's not a thing.
You know what I'm saying.
That's not a thing. I agree. And be totally off topic, and I was like kind of considering, should we talk about this today? But I spoke to one of the new coaches you brought on board. I'm not going to say his name, but guy's an animal, CrossFit guy. You know who I'm talking about, the animal. And we had a situation, and he was like, you know what, you probably should talk about this because I think it's important. So we recently had a client, great dude, come on board. And this is kind of like a message to all of the people out there. You know, if you hire someone, you need to be as honest as possible, or not even honest. You need to give the trainer as much, because maybe you don't know. So you're not dishonest if you don't know, right? But you need to confront people, to give your trainer as much data as possible so they can help you. And what I kind of wanted to say is, there are some people out there. We had a guy that basically, we discovered that he was in very poor health, and we told him, listen, dude, we want to work with you, but you have to get this stuff under control because you're at like a super, super kind of high risk for some serious issues if you don't get blood pressure, blood work, everything under control. Which is, if you're not happy with where you're at, you've let yourself go, you've had a tough time, jumping right back into hard training is also not always the answer. You know, we get a lot of guys that they want to train like they did 25, 30 years ago, and they don't have the body that no one does. I mean, whatever, if you're 50, you don't have the body you did when you were 20. I mean, obviously. But like, I think it's incumbent upon people to be very honest with themselves about where they are in this process. And sometimes you have to get in shape to train. You know, the analogy I used
Stages.
with this particular gentleman was like, there are fighters that get out of shape between camps. That's a disadvantage because they have to get in shape to go to camp.
Yeah. You have to lose that fat. You got to get in shape.
Yeah. So before they can even handle the high volume of skill training and plyometrics and everything, they have to lose enough weight that maybe their joints won't take as much of a beating. There are a lot of guys that were famous for that. They don't train for a month or 2 months after they're done with the fight, and now they got to start working out again, and then it's a whole process. And I guess I bring this up is that it doesn't have to be hardcore resistance training or something to accomplish your goals if you're in a situation where your body can't handle that. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think anyone who hires a coach needs to ask themselves, is this coach going to be honest with me about my situation? And how am I going to handle it if this guy tells me the truth and it's not what I want to hear?
Well, at the end of the day, they're paying us to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And like if you get a client, you know, we have had them, they're fucking, 60 pounds overweight. Mm-hmm. Not as often, but yo, the stages to the game. We got to prep you for the training.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to work properly. You're going to get burnt out. You can get discouraged. You're going to quit. Because now we have workouts and the diet that you're pretty much kind of far from.
Yeah.
But the point is the end result that you paid us for.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's just interesting to see that it happens where people get themselves so far out of shape, they really can't train hard. But it doesn't mean that you can't. Hard's all relative. Like if you have like major heart problems, hard training for you is zone 1 cardio. But that's the difference between living or dying.
I've had friends like
let's
that.
Let's just be honest.
They've been so removed from training. They put on 55 pounds. This one I was training people. They come back. I'm like, dude, easy.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm like,
no, you're not.
You don't look good right now, bro. You're borderline gonna have a fucking stroke.
Well, that's the thing was like, and this is kind of what I've been struggling with in my own training lately. It's like you're very big, and as you should be, on health markers. Like you always talk about silent killer, you know, heart disease, whatever, right?
Silent killer.
Like one of the major side effects of hard training, using anabolics, is going to be stuff like increased blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I bring that up in particular is exercise-induced hypertension occurs, right? So it's not uncommon for your systolic and diastolic blood pressure to go up 5 to 15 plus points during a hard session while you're straining. So if you go into a workout with hypertension, okay, now maybe for the next 90 minutes, you're going to be like turbo hypertensive, right? And now you're going to be at a massive risk of a heart issue or a stroke or something while you're training. And like, these are things that you need to take into account. And I was telling this particular gentleman, I was like, nowadays, bodybuilders, to their credit, a lot of them take blood pressure medication while they're on cycle. You know, because you know that the elevation is
stroke, dude.
It's going to happen, right? And like you always talk about the rusty pipes analogy for your arteries. Like your arteries and heart are not going to be elastic if the blood pressure is so high. They literally have to stiffen to prevent a rupture.
That's right.
Right. So like it's a physiological adaptation that occurs to prevent you from fucking dropping dead. And I just don't think enough guys like track that. And I've been telling more and more of our clients, I'm like, you got to get a blood pressure cuff.
Eric, they don't fucking understand that shit, bro.
I know, but it's the difference between life or death. You know,
when you
like,
explain it to them, maybe they'll take a grasp on and be like, oh, wait, maybe he's right.
Yeah.
They don't, you think they know hardened arteries?
No.
They don't even know what insulin is.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. But the way that I just realized now, the amount of people that want to get into hard training from like a macho perspective that are realistically not able to handle it because of the shape they've let their bodies get into, it's actually a lot higher than I thought, you know, and
you mean more people.
You know what I mean? Like one of the things that I've been struggling with, so I've gone through, I guess, like a mild midlife crisis over the past 6 months. I was like, you know,
at 30 something, bro.
38. Yeah, you know, you could be dead at 76. Could be the middle of your life. You don't know.
I'm way past that. I'm fucking 3/4 old. That's why I say, yo, we got to go. Brown guy, we got to fucking get the ball on roll. Get off your carpet and let's go.
It's just like I have trained jiu-jitsu for a long time. And that was my main physical endeavor after I got out of powerlifting. And when I started working with you, I'm like, you know, maybe I should like put some more size on so people take me a little bit more seriously. You know what I mean? Because I'm sitting here with my shirt on and everyone thinks I don't look like I train. And so I've really been dedicated to putting muscle on the past 6 or 7 months, right? And I check my blood pressure all the time. And I'm like 6'1", 6'2". I probably weighed 235 this morning. And I noticed that my blood pressure is going up and up and up. And it went from 115, 110 over 70 every day when I was around 215 to now I'm like 145 over 80.
Are you?
Yeah. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? You know? And that's kind of one thing I would want to talk to our clients about too. Like, how much does getting jacked really matter versus your health? Maybe we should get as jacked as we can within acceptable parameters, right? Like,
it's not harming your health.
Yeah. How much muscle mass can we carry without being hypertensive or having a problem with our triglycerides or hematocrit or whatever? And I just, even for me, someone who's a professional in this, I see how easy it is to get caught up like in the social media arms race of like, I have to get jacked to get eyeballs on me.
For the screen.
And one guy who I think, even though it's funny, when he's calm, he's great. When he's not my kind of content creator. Greg Doucette talks about this all the time.
Right.
He's always like, listen.
He's wonderful to me too.
Yeah.
I know.
Like he either when he does a show and he's calm, I think he's phenomenal.
And then he goes off on these rants.
Exactly. But like he obviously is very knowledgeable, and he's pretty much always saying like, how do you think this is going to wind up for you if you're abusing steroids for 10, 15 years? Like it doesn't end happily, generally speaking, right? It just doesn't happen. Like and if you're not getting anything from it, the question is then why are we doing it? And I get it because, like I said, I struggle with it. Like I've been out of jiu-jitsu for 6 months. I'm probably going to go back to the mat like next week. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know, you want to look good for the camera, but I'm like, from the most visceral, primal perspective, it would be easier to kick my ass in a street fight now than it was 6 months ago. It's a weird thing to think about. Like you want to be like the alpha dog.
You and I hold value in that.
Yes, it matters to me.
That's why I got so removed from bodybuilding for so long, because I want to put so much effort into that.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, most people care about what they look like, and I did for years and years. But to circle back to what you're saying about blood pressure, you kind of ramped up fast, relatively fast compared to other individuals. That's why it shot up, right?
Yeah.
That's why I noticed you. I haven't seen you that long. I'm like, dude, you're bigger. That's fast.
Yeah.
So a little side story for myself, right? When I went from being 190 pounds to 230 pounds over the course of a couple of years, my blood pressure was high. I didn't go
Of course,
But I'm a smaller guy, you know? So when I hovered, always went down to 205, even though I'm bigger than I should be, my blood pressure was perfect.
That's great.
It adapts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you stayed this for a continuous amount of time, this not getting any bigger, your blood pressure would level out.
Probably, yeah. No, I agree.
Definitively.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitively.
I agree.
With actually, just say you stayed, what do you weigh, 230?
Yeah.
230 and went back to that, but you maintained 230?
Yeah.
Your blood pressure would go back to being 115 over 70. It takes some time.
It's also important, I think some of people out there have to understand, like every type of training that is effective will cause physical adaptations, right? So, and there's only a finite amount of energy or recovery in your body that can go to these adaptations. So like if you're doing cardio, like what I've been doing, I do 3 50-minute sessions a week, right? Zone 2, like maybe no higher than 130 beats per minute. And then I'm lifting heavy, 3 to 4 days a week. Like my body right now, due to the nutrition that I'm putting in and the fact that I'm really lifting heavy, all of my recovery demands are going to building tissue, getting stronger and building tissue, right? Like muscle hypertrophy, right? Which means that the cardio is at best maintaining my fitness and burning calories, but my body is not making my capillaries, more dense to channel blood to various areas, because it's only going to do one or the other. It's either going to build capillaries or it's going to build tissue, right? And I think it's important to have phases in your training where it's like, okay, in this situation, all right, Eric, you went up to 230, 235. Now, why don't we maintain that size and then focus on improving conditioning while keeping your weight the same? Because it's actually really hard to develop multiple physical attributes simultaneously unless you're a beginner. Unless you're so out of shape that lifting weights is cardio, it doesn't work that way.
Introducing a new stress to everything. Everything's going to open one. But where you and I are, it can't be done. Yeah. It's either one or the other.
Yes, exactly. And some guys want to have it all. And I find that people are still unrealistic about that. Like it's a gentleman I was talking to the other day, and he came on as a fat loss guy. And he was like, I want to have turbo jacked arms. And I kind of told him, I was like, look, if we lose fat, your arms will obviously look better. And by the way, the real trick is the guy who's leaner always looks bigger than he really is.
Always.
That's what it is. Bodybuilding is really a fat loss contest. It's not so much a muscle building contest.
It's a diet contest.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? But if you're sitting here and you're like, hey, I really want to improve the size of a body part while I get shredded. Look, man, unless your name is Kevin Levrone, you know what I mean? The best you can do, unless you're really out of shape, okay, is maintain that tissue, right? Which means that if we really decide to push the lifting, okay, you're just going to get hurt. You're going to get tendonitis, which takes fucking forever to go away, especially in the elbows, right? And you're going to be at a higher risk for injury because your body's not going to be in a situation where it could tear through fat and then also build a lot of tissue, unless, again, you have incredible genetics, okay, which if you don't, there's like 5 Kevin Levrones ever, okay, those people don't exist, okay, unless you haven't trained for so long that your body will adapt in such a way because you've been away from training for so long, or you're willing to take insane amounts of drugs, which is obviously stupid and you shouldn't do. Right?
For what?
Again, like I tell all of our clients, like the only person that I would say, hey, sacrifice your health for your training is someone who stands to make money from doing that.
A substantial amount of money. Who's going to do it for a short period of time.
Exactly. Not a local bodybuilding show.
Worth.
Yes, exactly. Right. Especially if you have kids. And I just think people have to be a little bit more honest with themselves about where they're at, the realistic or unrealistic nature, of their goals, and just understand that just because you let yourself go for the past couple of years doesn't mean that we can get to your ideal body in 6 months. You know, if you and I go out in the parking lot and we spend 14 hours digging a ditch, it's going to take about 14 hours to put that shit back in the ditch.
Makes sense.
And that's before we start building on top of the ditch, right? You know what I mean? So in order to get back to where you were, it could take a year. Okay. And now you want to improve on where you used to be when you were 10 years younger. I mean, dude, we got to be honest. This is going to be a lot of fucking work, man.
People have to understand that.
Yeah. This is going to be a lot of work, you know? And
it's almost, what do you do when you tell someone who signs up, they're ready to go and they're really out of shape? It's almost disheartening.
Yes.
The reality.
Yes.
That, listen, we got to start this, but listen, if you want to get to the next stage, this is the steps that you must take.
100%.
Or one, you're going to mentally burn out, physically burn out. And also, you touched on a good point also. We are body composition coaches. You want to get shredded and you will look bigger when you're shredded. Yeah. You can't simultaneously get bigger and more jacked eating the way they do to shred down.
No
you
way,
will
dude.
definitively get hurt, especially if you're in your 40s. And even if you're a younger guy, it just can't happen. You're in a deficit to rip down body fat, to grow muscle, unless you're a beginner, isn't going to happen. Or unless you're on 1,000 milligrams of stanozolol.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wish that a lot of guys who are maybe unhappy with where they are were able to be a little bit more realistic. And part of it's the fitness industry's fault. Like, you'll see these insane transformations.
Fucks up your brain.
And people think that, A, that person is telling the truth, which they might not be. You know, hey, I went from this to shredded in 6 months. It probably took at least 18 months and you're full of shit. Okay. Also, they're not talking about the cocktail of shit they probably took to get to that point, plus things like airbrushing, photoshopping, whatever, right? But whenever we get someone who's really amped up to train, I almost want to be like, dude, let's pace ourselves here. Okay. You know, you hired us for 6 or 9 months. I don't know that I care where you're at in 3 weeks as much as I care about where you're at the end of the program, right? Because if we don't take this slowly, you're going to go right back to where you started when we're not working with you anymore, because you learned nothing. You picked an unsustainable pace and you're going to burn out and you're going to yo-yo in the other direction. And now you're probably going to be worse off, you know, from a health perspective. So I don't know, man. I find myself really recently rethinking my approach to this. And like I said, even with myself, I got to get more jacked. I want to look better for Instagram. And I'm like, but why?
Instagram.
Yeah, but why? Yeah, exactly. And I'm someone that if a client said that to me, I'd be like, who cares? But here it is, it's affecting me. It's so difficult for it not to affect you, you know?
One, I think we're also very honest to almost not a positive direction. What we say.
I agree.
We don't lie.
Yeah.
We tell the truth.
Yeah.
We tell the whole truth on here. And I got caught up in that, you know, because I got a bunch of comics that come through and be like, oh, do you even work out? Do you even think? I'm like, yo, I got to get more jacked because I took so much effort in the other direction, what I like.
Yeah.
But again, like, will I ever do what I did? No.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Ever.
No.
I will never do that. No. Will I put on a couple pounds? Okay. Look a little more jacked. Maybe I got 2 removed from it.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't do front delt raises because I knew I had to jab a million jabs on fucking
But it makes
Monday.
perfect sense. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sense. Yeah.
So whatever, it's 1 for 1. Time to put on a little muscle, but will I ever take fucking 1,000 milligrams testosterone ever again? Never.
Yeah.
Because where am I going?
Yeah.
Do you fucking guys care? They don't give a fuck.
Also, there's a lot of people that are like us now, influencers in a good way, that are starting to maybe push back against the unrealistic nature of the industry. And there's one guy, I think he's called like the sober bodybuilder, like this tatted up guy. And he does like... I
came across my feed.
Yeah, I like him a lot. And he does these interesting takedowns where a guy who's a lifelong natural will post their physique and they'll be like, 8 years of training, 5 days a week, discipline. And people will like shit on this person. Like, did you even go to the gym, bro? Like what the fuck? And it's like, we don't even know, like I've said this before, like no one even understands what like a natural body is supposed to look like, and it breaks all of our brains, but it's like even worse now because it's Instagram and you see all these different people. At the very least, when you were coming up in training and I was kind of coming up after that, I did know inherently, okay, when I see Flex Wheeler on stage at the Mr. Olympia, I know he doesn't look like that year round. And he'll tell you that. Yeah. He will tell you that, right? So like, we just have to be honest about this and really start to think about.
Are you saying that most people don't realize that they don't look like that all year?
Yeah, well, because here's the thing. Because with Instagram now, people do look turbo shredded year round. But it's like anything else. We don't know what that's going to look like on the back end of their life, right?
Yeah.
Like when MMA first started, here's a perfect example, right? A lot of people were like, well, it's safer than boxing because, you know, there's no standing 8 count and you could tap out and the ref stops the fight much more aggressively and blah, 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 blah. But you were able to get away with that claim because at that point in time, there weren't a lot of 50 to 70-year-old brain dead MMA fighters walking around. The sport was too young.
Right.
Right.
Not enough time.
So we didn't now you are seeing that people are brain dead. Okay.
Happens.
And you know,
we're training with the sparring.
Yeah, we're now seeing that this does happen. Now, there's a smaller sample size to draw upon than boxing, which is an older sport with infinitely more weight classes, and it's much more popular to a certain extent internationally, you know, and it's just a lot of culture and tradition around it. So we know. I think it's the same thing with the fitness industry now. It's like, okay, we do know that a lot of these 90s bodybuilders drop dead. You know, Andreas Munzer and all these people. Yeah, we know that these guys drop dead. Okay. But we told ourselves it was because they were so fucking huge, which is true. Okay. They were probably abusing diuretics, which is probably true. Okay. And so maybe we tell ourselves, well, you know, a guy that's 6'2", 220, and he maintains 5 to 7% body fat all year long, he's going to be fine. Maybe he won't be.
Right.
We don't know. We don't know. And no one is being honest about what they're taking. In our lifetimes, TRT has become the new natty. It used to be
the new natty.
Yeah, it used to be like, I don't do steroids, right? And you did do steroids. Now it's, well, I take testosterone, but that's all I take, right? And so Funny. Like it's the new form of natty, right? Everybody wants to lie down about their doses so they could play up their hard work or their genetics or whatever. There aren't that many.
You're getting a lot of DMs now, right? Yeah. And how many DMs that you comb through? You see, you know, I'm on testosterone replacement. I'm 52 years old, been taking 500 milligrams of testosterone. I'm like, dude. I'm like, and then, you know, not to bang on the guy, but he doesn't know. I'll be like, bro, you're not on testosterone replacement, man. Like, you're on a cycle.
Well, okay. I'm going to say something
for 30 years.
I'm going to say something that's very potentially controversial. So, you know, Zane, you can feel free to edit this out when the time is right. There's also a major problem with unethical doctors in the TRT field, right? So there's a person that you and I both know. I'm not going to say his name. I'll tell you off air. Not in good health, okay? Has an anti-aging clinic that he goes to. And if they screw up his order, you want to know what they do? They send him Winstrol. Here you go. Sorry, you screwed it up.
Winstrol?
Yeah, stanozol pills. Okay. This is an anti-aging clinic with a doctor running it. And they're selling you illegal performance-enhancing drugs.
That's not even a legal medication to prescribe.
Yeah. Now think about this. If a clinic has stanozol, or they're going to send you, like, how rarely is Anavar prescribed these days? I don't know. It's
rare.
You'd have to have like AIDS. Like literally, you'd have to have AIDS. Like I'm not saying that to make a joke. Like that's like it's prescribed for like serious muscle wasting, like real problem. Okay, you'd have to have full blown AIDS. Okay, like if they're willing to over prescribe Anavar or send you gray area, if not illegal drugs, under the guise of it being a legal service, is it really that much of a stretch that they're going to tell you to take 500 milligrams of testosterone a week?
No, that's
easy relative. Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's the other thing, because guys don't have a big knowledge background, and there's not enough
trusting the doctor.
Great societies are built upon high trust, right? Like great technological innovations occur. You've always heard that saying, I stood on the shoulders of giants and that's why I was able to accomplish something, right? Guys that split the atom didn't also discover the cell, right? They read the shit that other people did, they trusted it, and they used that knowledge and they took it to the next level. There's not enough fucking hours in the day for you or me or anyone else to become an expert on everything. You hopefully become an expert on what you do with your life and maybe one or two other hobbies that you get into. Otherwise, I don't know shit about cars. It's embarrassing. I don't know shit about cars. When I take it to the mechanic, the guy could rape me. Okay? Yeah, that's what happens all the time. It's a common thing, right? Like, I don't have enough time of the day to learn about the insides of my car and also do my job and be a dad.
Impossible.
So I bring that up. There are guys that are intelligent people. They've got kids. They have a demanding job. They're fucking tired. They're not going to sit down and read about physiology. They trust that the doctor is doing it for them. And then they go there and they get given a fucking insane amount of drugs and you could kill you.
Trusting the doctor.
Yeah.
Well, the
And-
doctor prescribed it.
Yeah.
I trust him. He's the doctor.
And the fact of the matter is, there's a huge market right now for essentially being a drug dealer. Because in our
Legal drug
lifetime,
dealer.
dude, testosterone replacement therapy used to be very rarely prescribed. It was done in a shameful way. You know, doctors were worried about the legality of it. And now it's become so popular.
Well, it got lifted. That ban got lifted off of it.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because it does
100%.
obviously show remarkable benefits.
Yeah.
But now it's getting swayed into the abuse category.
Absolutely, dude.
More often than not, what I see from all the DMs that I get.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of guys are on the top end of TRT, pushed past it. I'm like, that's not really TRT, bro. Okay, maybe your body can metabolize testosterone maybe a little more, not as efficiently as someone else. Maybe you require a higher dosage. Maybe a higher dosage.
Yeah.
But again, dude, like that's not really that common.
True TRT, and this is like almost a shame to admit, because guys do want to take higher doses. They do want to feel like a Superman. They do want to feel like $1 million. But if you look at like responsible clinics like Merrick, we have a couple clients of ours that use Merrick, and they'll send me their blood work and their doses. I don't know of a single one that's taken more than 150 a week, dude.
Right.
A single one. Like, that's true replacement.
Eric,
Like-
I've said this before about the 200 milligram.
It's a cycle.
Well, no, the 200 milligram per milliliter
Yeah.
on testosterone cypionate.
Yeah.
People way smarter than you and I didn't just pull that number out of a hat. That is the top end number that should be prescribed to an individual who is required for testosterone replacement, not beyond that. Okay, for metabolism, enzymatic changes, everything other under the umbrella. To go to past that is not really too often.
Yeah.
Very rare and far and in between.
Yeah.
Usually, if they even knew what a human body at max produces, is what, 7 milligrams daily,
Yeah.
right? 7 milligrams. What is that?
7 to 10. Yeah, it's like, I've heard the number 77 milligrams a week thrown
Top.
around quite a bit.
That's if
That's
you're-
like elite. Like, you're a freak.
You're
Yeah.
on the NFL field naturally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now they're prescribing, right?
200 milligrams.
Which is a lot of testosterone.
Yeah.
You're going to feel good on 200 milligrams of testosterone.
Yeah.
That's definitive. Don't say, yeah, of course you're going to feel better on 300, but there also comes this mark, not to go all over the place, there comes an area with testosterone you think more is better. It's not really better. They actually start to feel worse in other categories.
Absolutely. Better is better. More is not better. You know, it again, that's the thing. If you're taking so much drugs that your heart rate goes up through the roof, your blood pressure goes through the roof, your workouts will actually suffer. Your sleep will suffer. Okay. But I'll tell you what, man, this is just a very revealing. I'm being very intimate with you here, Vin. Another thing that I've been just thinking about, like, I don't know that I like the personality changes that come along with higher doses of gear anymore. I don't know that I do.
I don't think we ever did.
I think when we have less at stake in life,
You're speaking about yourself. Are you speaking
yeah. But I mean, like, your libido can go through the roof, which can be fine. But dude, I got 2 kids. Like, very stressful time in a marriage. You know what I mean? To try to be like having sex with your wife like 14 times a week, right?
It gets annoying sometimes.
It gets annoying. It becomes a distraction. There are some people that are very meek that maybe if you give them drugs, they'll become a little more assertive, and it could maybe change it for the positive. But I am not. I'm a very intense person. I don't have an issue with a killer instinct in the jiu-jitsu class or something like that.
Far.
And you go too far, and like. I just don't think, and this is something that Greg Doucette talks about a lot, and I got to give him credit because I think it takes a little bit of honesty and maybe like you have to be willing to admit that you're not perfect to say this, but like those steroids do change your brain, and to a certain extent, like it could be too much. And I see a lot of guys that'll comment on our stuff and they'll say stuff like, you know, you're a pussy, you get control of yourself, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, first of all, if you've been doing a lot of gear for a long time, I'm not sure that you know who you are without the drug. So just because you feel this way all the time doesn't mean that you should feel this way or that you were meant to feel this way, right? So like your sense of self, if you've been doing steroids since you're 18 and now you're 35, for your entire adult life, you've been modified chemically, okay? Maybe you weren't supposed to behave this way. Maybe you weren't supposed to feel the type of emotion or the intensity of emotion that you feel in any given situation. It's not a matter of like, get control of yourself. Like, okay, just because I want to kill you and I don't kill you doesn't mean that there aren't chemical reactions within my body that cause a great deal of physiological and psychological
What's
stress.
going to happen is also this, right? Speaking about the meek person. I know someone, he's not so meek, but definitely more reserved than what he turned into.
Yeah.
I see him in a place where he shouldn't peel off his shirt. He went from being a zero, went from 0 to barely past the part, above a 0. But to him, he got jacked, and he did dramatically change. And first cycle, right? He tests, trying to master on. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
It's a lot, man.
I'm like, what are you doing? Trying to nantate 400 milligrams this. Dude, his personality was like totally different person. He liked who he was then.
Yeah.
Aggressive, forward. I saw it. And then what's going to happen, dude? You're going to come off.
You're going to be a different person.
And then you're going to go back to that. And then you're going to want to stay on that.
Of course.
But that's not really you.
Yeah, exactly. The hardest part with drugs, I think, all drugs, okay, so I'm not just talking PEDs here, is the psychological addiction.
That's a psychological addiction.
Yes.
That's what's going to happen.
I'm not an expert on recreational drugs. I don't plan to be one, okay? But there are very few drugs, from what I understand, that the physical withdrawals are so intense that they could kill you. Pretty much alcohol and opioids.
Alcohol's one.
Yeah, those are the two ones that come to mind. If you go to rehab for alcohol abuse,
they wean.
They're either going to wean you, or they have drugs that they're going to give you to exactly. Okay. Opioids, same thing. If you quit them cold turkey, you're going to have a rough time. Okay. But why do people relapse on these things? It's not because their body is craving it anymore, because it's out of your system. Okay. You're no longer needing them to get back to square one. Some guys do drugs to get back to square one, not to get to square 10. You know what I mean? That's when you know you're a fucking addict. Problem is, you now have situations in your life that are triggers for these types of things, and you like how you feel on these things, and there's an emotional dependency. And I think a lot of us have to be honest about anabolic use. We are psychologically addicted to these drugs. And because the media has misinterpreted the danger of them and drastically overplayed it and said things that were bullshit, we now assume that there are no health issues with them. The media was wrong, so it's fine. That's just not the case. And, like I said, I just had to really be honest with myself.
We speak about anabolics a lot and what happened, but the reality is the way we speak about them, we're not pushing them. We speak about they could be very harmful, misused, and what's happening is social media is making this disproportionate fucking, I'm saying, all these kids abusing it, and they're posting these dosages. I'm like, do they even know what's going on?
No, I don't know.
You know what's happening? You see now, it's a serious problem. I don't know if it's true, but you see more 16-year-olds and 14-year-olds taking these drugs.
It's crazy.
Dude, when I was younger, okay. My real brother's friends, they were maniacs. They were, 17, 18 years old. They took Anadrol 50 and Testosterone. They were jacked. And there's a time period, like when I was younger, no one took steroids in high school.
No. It was very rare.
It's very common because of social media.
Yeah.
You see kids using steroids. So this guy's using steroids like he's using them at 14. Their bodies aren't even nearly developed.
Not even
now
close.
they're fucking thrown in seriously harmful hormones that's going to disrupt their axis forever.
Yeah.
They don't think of that, though.
No, of course not. Yeah.
Social media did play a big negative role in the portrayal of anabolic steroids.
Yeah, and that's like, to myself, I'm thinking about like, all right, maybe I'm just going to cut my lifting back, get back into jiu-jitsu, because I'm a brown belt anyway, and I want that black belt. That's a life accomplishment that I've always wanted, and I'm always going to train. It's not like I'm going to get my black belt and stop training, right? But that's a life accomplishment that I fucking want. Add to my resume. That means a lot to me. And it's like, I think about it, I'm like, would I rather have the confidence in my body to know that I could defend myself and my family, or look good? You know what I mean? And by the way, that implies that I wouldn't look good at 220.
Listen,
I look better than most people at 220.
I looked good enough, and I like kickboxing and rolling.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
I was jacked to do it.
Of course.
Am I 10 pounds bigger? Is that going to matter? No, that doesn't matter as much for me. Yeah, we gotta soundproof that.
Yeah, this is pretty brutal. Yeah, so I just think that's an issue, and I think people have to also be honest about it in terms of what it's doing to you, the way that your body responds to these things, and the long-term effects. So my point is, because of the overprescription of testosterone these days, I think we're going to have an MMA thing like we discussed, which is like we're now going to actually have a significant sample size that later in life we will see what, if any, downsides there are to this, right? There may be situations where we have like perfect example. Before, this might have happened when you were a kid, but this is probably before your time. There was a period of time where it was like margarine is better than butter.
Right.
And they made everyone have margarine. And margarine is like basically an isomer of the saturated fat that's in butter, okay? And everyone thought for some reason that margarine was healthier. It was not. It caused massive amounts of heart disease, and people were fucking dropping dead. Well, you didn't find out until you've been having margarine on literally everything for 20 or 30 years, and all of a sudden your fucking arteries are clogged.
This to make margarine, by the way?
I was just thinking that, you know, when I was a kid, you definitely would see it in grocery stores.
I've eaten tons of it younger.
Yeah.
Margarine.
Yeah, nowadays you don't see it anywhere, right? So like this could be it's true, or like smoking cigarettes as an example, right? You're going to see it with weed use now. Like now people are taking such concentrated crazy doses of this stuff for much longer periods. That could be a health crisis that occurs later in life. Like your neurotransmitters might be fucked up. Like for sure, we don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see the sample size that comes from irresponsible testosterone use, and exactly not only what does it look like, but when does it stop helping you? You know, is it if you start when you're 18 and you don't come off till you're 40 or whatever? Is it 45 you have major heart issues? Is it 50, 60? Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe everything that we're saying here will be wrong. But the way I look at it, I almost feel like our perspective on, just get your blood work done is almost wrong. In the sense of like, I've trained a lot of fat people over the years, all right? Like really fat people. And I will look at their blood work, and actually their blood work is fine. And my perspective on this was always, your body is working overtime to maintain a healthy degree of homeostasis, okay? Sooner or later, it's not going to be able to keep that up.
Fighting.
So if you're taking a lot of gear and your blood work is fine, well, guess what? Your kidneys are working overtime. Your liver is working overtime, okay? And eventually it's not going to be able to keep that pace up anymore, and then things start to fall apart. And I was listening to this podcast, and it really made me think about exactly what the fuck we've done to our bodies over the years. Talking about one of the reasons why, let's say you might have kidney issues while you're on anabolics, right? And it was referencing how there seems to be some research, some evidence. This might have been a Todd Lee thing. How like, if you were on a lot of steroids, most of your stem cell activity, because of the modified environment in your body, will go towards building muscle mass, right? You've created a more anabolic environment in conjunction with training and diet, whatever, okay? Well, that also means that your stem cells, because there's a finite amount of them doing a finite amount of processes, are not repairing your kidneys.
They're good to building muscle tissue.
Right. So now it might not be that they might not even necessarily be bad for your kidneys. They might just be keeping your kidneys from repairing themselves because those efforts are going elsewhere. I never thought about it that way before.
That's why also they're called steroid cycles.
Yeah, yes.
Which no one does anymore.
Yeah, that's very true. Dude, someone, you had a...
But again, not to go off of that, how many times could your body go back and forth?
Yeah.
You push it, you stop. You push it, you stop. We're tissue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even mechanical engines that made of steel eventually do what? Break.
Yeah.
Now your soft tissue, ligaments, organs, eventually breaks down. Can't regenerate. Or even the regeneration can't keep up. Mm-hmm. Doesn't happen the same. That's when you get older. You can't withstand that as you get older. And eventually you're going to have problems.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And
I don't know. Does this seem logical to me? It's logic.
Yes.
It's common sense.
Yes. It's an interesting experiment into how irrational humans can be, ourselves included, in that, like, in order to get to the top of a social hierarchy, you will do remarkably stupid and unhealthy things just to be at the top of the pyramid and have access to the most resources, women, whatever, men, whatever your thing is, right? So, like, on some level, you know this might not be good for you. You engage in a degree of self-deception so you don't have to think about it on a day-to-day basis, right? And then, you know, you do what you have to do to get to the top of that pyramid, but that's a very finite thing. You're not going to be there forever, right? And then what happens? Like, you have problems. So I don't know. I guess this is something that comes with, I'm pushing 40. You know, you start to think about these things as you get older. And going through this recent phase where I've been doing some very heavy, like, bodybuilding training, I love the training. But when I see my blood pressure go up, or I think to myself, like, am I sacrificing even a year of good health on this earth for this?
Maybe.
Right? That's, you know, I've seen people comment, I probably shouldn't read the comments, but it's interesting. You and I will do comments about longevity. And people will be like, well, how long do you want to fucking live? And And I'm like, tell me that you don't have kids without telling me that you don't have kids. I actually responded to one of them like, I want to live for as long as my children need me. Period. Right? So like, no, I don't want to be some Superman until I'm 50 and then drop dead. Like, now maybe I would have made that deal when I was 20.
People who make these statements, if they're facing doors death, they're going to have a different tune.
Dude, I'm so glad you said that. It's so fucking easy to be macho when you're not staring down the barrel of a fucking gun.
Stare down the barrel.
It's so easy to be like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Well, guess what, dude? If you're driving to work one day and you're 45 years old and you have a massive heart attack and your car fucking careens off the road into the woods and you're dying, in that moment, you would make any deal to not die, right? Any
billion
deal.
percent.
It's like people.
What's the saying? There are no atheists in foxholes.
Yes, it's 100% true. Same concept as like when you're a kid and you watch movies and there's someone's like a prisoner of war.
I love that statement, by the way.
Oh, it's great. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, it changed my life for sure.
No atheists in foxholes. When you push there, God, please help me.
Yep, absolutely. But like you watch a movie and someone's getting like tortured and like they break under the torture and that guy's a pussy. It's like, dude, if you were in the fucking Hanoi Hilton for 3 years, you're breaking. Now you might not.
Fold.
Now that's why we hope you don't know that much relevant information. That's the military understands this. They change things. You always, you know what I mean in terms of intelligence.
They have you strapped
and
down.
words.
They're holding a circular saw to your dick or to your ankle, and they're going to cut off your foot.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, there are some people that will say "fuck you" and they'll die, and that is the extreme exception.
More though than the circular saw to the ankle in that instant. I think the duration of time under torture folds people more than anything.
Yeah. Like as a brief aside here, my Uncle Ted, my dad's oldest brother, is a Vietnam veteran. He enlisted during the Vietnam War, enlisted in the Marines. They made him fix F-4 Phantom fighter jets, and we've always suspected this. He got this because my uncle Rocco was a general, and I think he didn't want him going into combat, and so kind of like, pushed him in a way away from combat. He married my Aunt Melissa. Her father was an F-105 Thunder Chief pilot in Vietnam.
Cool.
These things had like a damn near 45% casualty rate, which if you think about it as like flying a plane, that's dreadful odds. Dreadful.
Half. That's 50%.
It's like 40 to 45% of them were lost during the war.
No
flying a plane.
way.
Flying a plane. That's dreadful, dude. So this, I mean, at that point, it's like, if you're statistically better off, maybe as an enlisted Marine in a war versus flying a plane, that's wild, the difference, right? So he gets shot down. He spends like 8 or 10 years in the Hanoi Hilton. 8 or 10 years, okay? Survived.
A decade.
Survived it, okay? I don't know the exact number. There might be a history nerd, and I say that lovingly, that's going to tell me that time frame is unrealistic. All I know is that it was a long enough time that he came back, his kids were grown up. So we're not talking about 2 years.
That's okay? A long time.
Yeah, we're talking about like
just a long duration of time.
You missed your kid's childhood. Okay, now he survived it. He died relatively young because you don't get to be that malnourished and stressed out for a fucking 6 to 10 year period or whatever, right? But he had a lot of interesting insight into like how to survive this. And what was so interesting was it was all mental. So like he spoke about like optimism and self-forgiveness insofar as guys that would break under torture that had a macho outlook were more likely to die because they had an unrealistic expectation of how they would perform under pressure. Whereas guys that perhaps understood that when, like you said, they have a circular saw to your nutsack, that they were going to break because you want to see your family again, but they forgave themselves, they were more likely to survive. The guys who were self-hating died. And the guys that weren't, of course, with relatively equal degrees of physical treatment, right? Because you could be self-hating and they don't really fuck with you versus you're a strong-willed person and they torture you every day.
That guy you're speaking about could withstand anything mentally.
Yeah. No. And
it's the duration of time.
So the point is, like, when you stare down that barrel of a gun, like you said, I don't care how tough you were on Instagram 15 years ago. Like, I'm sorry, you probably want to redo. You know what I mean? I just don't see it. I just don't get it. And so, unfortunately, the way health works.
I'm glad we're having this conversation, by the way.
Really?
It's like,
Yeah.
about like, you know, I did the same thing you did, but I'm like 2 months past the 3 months ahead. I'm like, I'm gonna get a little more jacked.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take some testosterone. I'm gonna do this. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Well, because then it gets to a point when you have to commit. So for someone like me or you that used to be much bigger, right? And you get back into serious training, I'm gonna just be totally honest. The first 3-4 months is easy. You put that old muscle mass back on so quickly, right? The weight is flying up on the barbell, right? Because you used to squat 200 pounds more, right? So you already built that tissue, you built that strength that comes back on really, really quickly. But when you start feeling your sleep quality get a little worse because you're getting a little too big.
Happened to me last night.
Yeah.
Like I just thought I slept terribly.
Yeah. When you start like maybe feeling a little too out of breath in certain things, you have to make a decision. Am I going to push or am I not going to push? Right. And I think what I'm learning is like, I don't know that I would want to push. I don't know that I ever see myself dedicating another 5 years to hardcore bodybuilding and like stepping on stage, because I just don't think that it's worth it. I don't.
For what?
Yeah.